Form 5 Chapter 1, Plant Tissues and Growth. Now, in my opinion, I think that this is one of the most important plant chapter for this year's SPM because, yeah, quite many years didn't come out already. And for Form 5s who are facing your first terms, right, this is also a very good revision because usually your first term definitely have Form 5 Chapter 1 lah. Now, I straight away start with one of the most common type of question, growth zones in plant. Now, whenever you see a root tip or a shoot tip, then showing you like 3 growth zones one, remember, this is primary growth. There's only 2 growth in plants, primary and secondary. So if you see growth zones like this one, shoot tip, root tip, and they ask you type of growth, remember lah, this is definitely primary growth. Secondary growth, you will see the 2 rings one, the cambium ring and the vascular cambium and the crop cambium growing radially one. That will be secondary growth. So the 3 zones, very easy. At the tip one is always zone of cell division, your cell divide. Then here your cells start to grow big, called elongation. Here your cells start to form useful permanent tissues called differentiation. So when writing the zones, right, please write like this: zone of what? Write the full thing in exam, cannot be lazy. So zone of cell differentiation. And then zone R is zone of cell, I just write like this, division. Okay, then the main process, remember lah, they occur at zone of cell division if you ask, is mitosis, because cell divides actively by mitosis. And then at zone Q, the main process you got to know is this one, the vacuole merge to become a huge vacuole. So this is called vacuolation, by the way. Now they're asking us to draw the plant cell that is found in zone Q. So what you can see is the small vacuoles here are absorbing water, slowly increasing in size, and then eventually will merge. So first, draw a cell wall. So plant cell always have a cell wall. Cell wall always have 2 layers. Draw like that. Then here is your nucleus, and then your vacuole by this time will become one huge vacuole. So that's how you draw. So better to label. The main thing you have to label is the vacuole. Moving on. Yeah, we draw already. Name the process in 5.2. So the process of vacuum merging, remember, is called vacuolation. Now, if they ask you to explain what happens here, so how they actually elongate, expand in size, right, is by absorbing water. So I just type the answer here. You can say, basically, water diffuses into vacuoles by osmosis. And then the small vacuole merge to become or fuse. So we say small vacuoles fuses to form large vacuole. So that is basically vacuolation. Okay, if they ask you to explain that. Then diagram 5.2 shows a cross section of plants that undergoes different type of growth. So obviously now you can see that from like this become like this called secondary growth lah. You can see it's becoming thicker. There are more secondary tissues. Okay, before we answer this question, which they asked us to compare here, now I want to go through a bit of labeling. Okay, so here the main thing they will ask you to label is the secondary xylem and phloem. Now, how to differentiate which one is primary, which one is secondary? So first, start from the ring first. So this is called the vascular cambium. That is the tissue that forms your xylem and phloem. So during secondary growth, it will mitosis inwards and outwards to form the secondary xylem and phloem. So the one that is closer to the ring, closer to the center, are your secondary tissues. So the inside one is xylem, so this is secondary xylem. This one is secondary phloem. And the one further away from the ring will be the primary, because secondary is formed later, primary is formed first. So primary will always be pushed further away because secondary comes later. So this one will be primary xylem. This one will be primary phloem. Okay, and then you have another ring on the outside. It's called the cork cambium. So cork cambium, just like vascular cambium, will also mitosis in and outwards. When it mitosis inwards, it will form what we call as a secondary cortex. So initially you only have cortex. Cortex is like the flesh of the stem. So you got secondary cortex. And the outer layer, it will be called as cork. Okay, cork eventually becomes something called the bark. Chinese way the 树皮, the thick, rough layer of the woody stem. Yeah, so these are the things that are formed during secondary growth. So there are 4 main tissues formed during secondary growth. Okay, and this is obviously a stem that have only undergone primary growth because there are no secondary tissues like in the plant B. So they're asking here to compare. So first, the meristem tissues involved. So I said just now already, primary growth will always involve the root tip and the shoot tip, and you grow tall. So this part is called the apical meristem. Secondary growth will always involve the two rings, the two cambiums we mentioned, now the cord cambium, the vesicle cambium, right? This is called lateral meristem. And apical meristem primary growth, right, cause plant to grow tall. So it increases, okay, just put arrow up, increases the length of the top part, which is stem, and the bottom part, the roots. And then this one will increase what we call as the width, or you can say the thickness. And the answer here will give diameter, but I think better not to use diameter because our textbook mainly say width or thickness. So I write thickness, easier, increase the thickness of stem and also roots. Okay, here I bonus you one more, which this one is the growth direction. So these two is actually related one. So the direction of growth is up and down. So we say it grows longitudinally. Because of that, it increases the length. And this one, it grows radially. Radially comes from radius, 半径, the circle radius. So it grows radially. That's why it increases the thickness. All right, the next question. It asks here, plant B, which is secondary growth in a plant, can live longer compared to plant A. Explain the advantages of the type of growth experienced by plant B that can increase its lifespan. So plant B, why does it live longer? Because remember, secondary growth takes many years to occur. Okay, so because what's the advantage? Because now plants who undergo secondary growth form secondary tissues. For example, the xylem, the phloem. So secondary xylem mainly will have wood lignin inside. So it doesn't just make the plant thicker; it also make the plant even harder and stronger. So this, you can say, it basically provides stability for plants. I give you one more point here. You also can say it form woody tissues. So the combination of thicker stem and wood will make it tougher, stronger. And also the bark. So these second tissues will all have benefits. So bark is like a protective layer. So it's usually very strong, very thick. Now, if you read your textbook, right, it actually can protect the plant against insects and also pathogens, means germs. So it protects plants against, you can say, attack from insects, pathogens and insects. And you also can say this thing, right? It's sort of like if it's cold outside, right? It can like insulate it. So it can also protect it from extreme weather. Protect plant from extreme weather conditions. Okay, just right here, condition. Understand? So that is why secondary growth usually adapts better, survives longer, have better survivability. Okay, so that's the first question. Done. Okay, this Pahang one actually quite simple. You have growth zones again. So this one you can try yourself. I'll skip this one. Okay, I will do another one, SPP here. Okay, this one got more tougher question a bit. So for this one, same, you have growth zones. Now, and also remember for root tip, right? Other than the 3 growth zones, right? If they point at this part, right? You got like something like a cap covering the root like that. This is called the root cap. But this question, they didn't ask the importance, the function. Okay, I just write here in case they ask. So they ask what is the function of a root cap? It basically protects the root tip from injuries. So you can say this. It protects the root tip from injuries. Why? Is because when the root is penetrating the soil, sometimes it could hit like harder stones or drier soil. You could damage the root tip. So you can say while penetrating into the soil. Hey, so that's the function. So zone, this one same like just now lah. So X, the tip 1 zone of cell division. Of course, remember to write the zone of also. Here I just write the main point lah. And then Y is zone of cell elongation. State the process that occur in zone Z that produce cells that have a specific shape. So Z is called zone of cell differentiation. So the process that they occur is differentiation, cell differentiation. So before they undergo cell differentiation, right, they are just a group of normal cells. They look the same and they have no function for the plant. Just like we baby, they are useless, so we only know how to cry and sleep. So these are called meristematic cells. After differentiation already, they will become permanent tissues. So there are three types of permanent tissues that we learn, which is the ground tissue, the vascular, and also epidermal tissue. Yeah, so those are permanent ones. Sorry, my pen not very good here. Okay, then the next question they ask about the annual growth rates. So 4.2 shows the cross-section of a stem of a plant living in a temperate climate. Temperate means got 春夏秋冬, got the 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And the rings form a combination of dark and light growth rings. Now, if you forget already, right, every year there'll be 2 color punya rings. The darker one is thinner, and the lighter color one will be bigger. So this one will form mainly during spring, and this one will form mainly during summer. And during winter, there'll be no growth. So these two will then repeat again next year. So every 2 rings alternately represent 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, like that. Okay, so let's say they ask you to explain how the rings are formed. So you must say during spring that time. Now, why is it lighter? It's because there is sufficient water and sunlight. So basically, there will be more secondary growth. So the rings that you see, right, are actually secondary xylem. Okay, but when you write answer to them, we don't say secondary xylem, we will say the xylem vessels form will be bigger, brighter. This is bigger and brighter. So during summer that time, now summer in Malaysia is a bit different here. So their summer is usually drier, hotter. So there'll be lesser water. So if they ask you to explain this one, okay, I'll just find an empty space here. So dark is because there is lesser, is hot and dry, or you can see there's lesser water supply. So basically there's less secondary growth. So the rings form, we will say, is smaller. The xylem vessels are smaller, darker. So that's what we can say. Okay. And then, but for this question, they ask, what would happen to the annual rings if summer was longer? So if summer is longer, we already mentioned summer the time I form a darker ring. So your summer, let's say, is 5 months instead of 3 months. So your darker ring is going to be bigger because there'll be more growth there will be more of summer punya type of growth. And since it's lesser water, there's more and more dark color punya form. So the darker colors because it's dry, less water. So that's what we're going to say. Darker rings form will be bigger because there is lesser water supply during summer. So that is the main reason. Understand? So that's the answer. And then here, once again, they're asking us to compare primary growth and secondary growth. So they show us there is a mangosteen tree undergo primary growth to increase their height, followed by secondary growth. So basically, they're asking to compare these two. So same like what we did just now. What tissue you involve? You involve the same one, apical meristem. Okay, since we did just now already, I just write the main point here. So apical meristem. This one involve lateral meristem. Other than that, you also can say it increase height, increase the thickness. Okay, if you don't write just now the increased length, increased thickness one, right? You also can say wood this thing. So only in secondary growth you will produce woody tissues. This one does not produce woody tissues. You also can say the annual growth rate. Secondary growth produces annual growth rate, primary does not. Okay, so these are other difference that you also can say. And then we do a Selangor paper here. Okay, first they ask us to label. Now, name tissue K. Now, tissue K, right, will be quite confusing because there are 2 ways they can ask you to label this. Listen carefully. If you ask name tissue, there are mainly 3 types of tissue in plants: epidermal, ground, vascular. So the surface one is called epidermal tissue. But if, however, they ask us to label, so K will be just called an epidermis. Epidermis is a type of epidermal tissue. Okay, so in humans, right, epidermal is known as epithelial. Like your skin is called epithelial. So epithelial is for many human animals. Epidermal is plants. Okay, And then, yeah, if they point here, then label, then of course this is your vascular. Now in STEM, right, this will be called the vascular bundle. They ask the label. If you just say tissue, then it's just vascular tissue. But remember, in roots, right, it will be known as vascular cylinder. So the name will be slightly different, right? Then, but of course, this question here, they could point something at L. L, actually, they're pointing at the ring between the xylem and the phloem. So this is the vascular cambium, actually. So I just write at the side here, vascular cambium. And then M is pointing at the outside one. So just now we just went through. This one closer to the ring one is always a secondary tissue. So outside one is secondary phloem. Now give one function of tissue. Okay, so the epidermal tissue here is basically the bark. Alright, so you can talk about the function of bark. So you can say it basically protects plant from attack of insect and pathogen. Explain the role of structure L in the formation of structure M. So L, what does it do to form M? It basically mitosis during secondary growth. So structure L, mistake, outwards to form structure M. Then you can say during secondary growth. So that is the two things you have to say lah. Mitosis, secondary growth. Then next one, okay, be a K-Bud question. They say the bark of young trees contains ring or vascular bundles. Gardeners protect young trees by wrapping plastic tubes around the lower part of the trunk. So let's say here is a plant. They say I use plastic bag to wrap like this part here. Now, because young plants, their stem is softer. So insects, since they're closer to the ground, they might, bite the plants, damage the xylem, damage the phloem, so it could affect transport of water and also organic substance. So you want to prevent that from happening. So yeah, we can say it basically protects the stem from attack of insects, you can say. So to prevent stem being damaged. So if the stem is not damaged, you can ensure the xylem, the phloem, that's the main thing, can continue transport. So it's to ensure water. So what's in xylem? Water, minerals, salt. What's in your phloem? Organic substance can be transported efficiently. All right, another question done. Another one you're going to do. Okay, this is an essay question also for Selangor. Okay, I'll go a bit mixed with other chapter. There's a bit of chapter 3 here, so I will do this as well. But this chapter 4 one, this one I don't do that. This one I will do a separate video for chapter 4, which is actually comparing the transpiration and guttation. So here, name structure P. Actually got mixed chapter 1 and 3. So this one can be 1, can be 3 also. So they're pointing at this part, just now we mentioned already, right? It's the root cap. Q is pointing at the bulu at the surface of the root. That is your root hair. Done. If R is absent, explain the effect on water and mineral salt intake. So the epidermis of the roots, right, mainly have hair, root hair. So they ask, without the root hair, what will happen? So root hair basically are long projections that increase the surface area so water can diffuse in faster. So without it, the rate of absorption of water and mineral salts will be slower. So no root hair, surface area of roots for water and mineral absorption. Yeah, we write this decreases. So therefore, rate of water and mineral salts absorption decreases. So this is the effect. You absorb water slower. Why? Because the surface area decreases. So that's the thing. Okay, this one a bit of K-Bud question. I believe that whoever sat for Selangor paper 1, okay, this one a bit struggle. So they show you that you have an orchid plant. Explain the steps that Madam X should take to ensure that her orchid plant remains healthy. So what you are seeing here is, right, they use a coconut husk. So very often you see question saying or asking orchid plant in the coconut husk. Why? Okay, I'll explain in a moment. So for this essay question, first we start off as saying what type of plants are orchid. So orchid, they are basically what we call as epiphytic plant. So epiphytic plant is like commensalism. You need to grow on the host, but you don't harm the host. You benefit from the host, but the host is not harmed. It's not like parasite, you absorb nutrients. So you can say, no, whereby it grows on other host plant. For the schema, right, you write coconut husk actually got marks one, so you can say plant because it's a step that I should take. So you mention the step, plant it in a coconut husk. Okay, why? Because number one, yeah, they need to grow on host. Number two, coconut husks, they can retain water, but the water will not always be there. They also have a lot of lobang, a lot of air. So their roots, right, actually need a lot of air to survive. So this coconut husk, since there's a lot of, it's very porous, a lot of lobang, 很多洞, it let air go in easily. So these two things you say, it's like a mangkok like that. It can store water, can accumulate water. It also provide aeration for roots. And another thing you can suggest here is don't use soil, because their roots need a lot of air to survive. If you put soil, you will damage the roots, you cause the root to suffocate. So do not use or plant it in soil, because it will damage the roots. Because, yeah, so you can write this down. Okay. So the next question, Terengganu paper, same thing again lah. Okay, you have the three zones again. They ask you what's the function of R. R is the root hair, just now. Increase surface area to increase rate of absorption of water. So this one I will skip. The other half question is over here, which they ask, structure L is involved during growth occurring in the plant stem. So L is the thing between the xylem and the phloem. That is your vascular cambium. So differentiate the growth that takes place in 6.1 and 6.2. Okay, 6.1 just now was the root tip, the primary growth. So they're asking to compare primary growth and secondary growth. Once again, we already did this earlier today. The meristem tissue, basically one is apical meristem for primary, secondary, lateral. Just now dah cakap dah. Okay, then the annual ring, of course, only secondary growth produces annual ring. So you can say annual ring in 6.1 is absent, annual ring in 6.2 is present. Now take note a bit, if let's say they ask you to write difference in section A question, you must write it in sentence. So you must say, for example, meristem tissue involved in 6.1 is apical meristem, meristem tissue involved in 6.2 is lateral. Annual growth ring in 6.1 is absent, annual growth ring in 6.2 is present. That's how you answer lah. Okay, so characteristics of stem of timber such as shoria that has high economic value. Explain. So timber means wood. Plants that have wood are plants that undergo secondary growth. So especially like shoria, chengao, these kind of trees, their wood are even stronger. We usually use their wood to make like furnitures, let's say for example. So they ask us to write the characteristics of the stem. So you can say it basically produces wood that is hard and strong. So if the wood is hard and strong, what can we use it for? You can use it to make furnitures, for example. Make beams in building. And one more thing you also can say is, since these are plants that undergo secondary growth, they also have annual growth rings. Annual growth rings make your wood more attractive, therefore more valuable lah. So you can say it makes it more attractive. Okay, next, I add a bit of bonus over here. I also put in a bit of 2024 punya state trial lah, because the questions that I go through just now don't have the growth curve in plant. So remember, you have three types of growth curve in plant. You have annual, 1 year, biennial, 2 year, and perennial, more than 2 years. Annual, one of the most common one they like to ask. So which there are 3 growth stages here they like to ask you. So the first one, P, is the most common they like to ask that. Okay, so by the way, this one you can see only one sigmoid curve one. So the type of plant is definitely annual plant. Two examples of annual plants. So annual plant, right, they always look like this one. So since annual and biennial plant, remember, they don't undergo secondary growth. They are usually very small. They don't grow very big. They are very thin. So what kind of plants look like that? Paddy, corn, watermelon. Yeah, these are the common ones. State the process that occurs in the paddy plant during stage P. So during stage P, the mass decreases, right? Okay, here they only ask you what's the process. They didn't ask you the growth. So you don't have to say, oh, the mass decreases because blah, 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 what. You just have to say, what are they undergoing here that cause the mass to decrease is germination. But let's say if they ask you to explain the growth here, what caused the mass to decrease? Now, what happens during germination is, you can say this, the dry mass decrease is because during germination, right, they use the food storage in the cotyledon, means in the flesh of the seed, to grow. So they absorb nutrients inside, and that's why when you plant seeds that time, right, after that, right, the seed will start to shrink, leaves will start to form because they use the food to grow. And then in the end, right, the skin of the seed will drop off also, causing it to be even lighter. So it's why seed coat is discarded. Also, you can say that, discarded. Okay. Then if let's say they ask you this last zone, the last phase, sorry, why the mass decrease here is because, now I know they are becoming old already, but before the plant dies, other than the plant aging, right, what will happen is they will disperse seed. So because their lifespan very short, before they die, they must reproduce. So they'll throw their seeds out. Their seeds will fall, causing them to be lighter. So dry mass here also decrease because there's dispersal of seed. Now since they're aging, they're about to die, leaves and flower also will shed, will dry and start to fall off. Yeah, aging. And then okay, they got asked a bit of K-Bud question. Which state the process, this one here, which type of plants can adapt to extreme surrounding? Sorry, here, mistake. So out of the three, annual, biennial, perennial, the answer is actually perennial plants. Because remember, they are the only plant that can undergo secondary growth. Just like we mentioned earlier today, secondary growth forms a lot of secondary tissues which benefit them. For example, you are able to form the bark. Bark protects the plant, remember just now, from insects and pathogens. Other than that, since they live for many years, right, they can produce fruits and seed many times, which means they can reproduce many times, so they can make sure that they won't extinct easily. Yeah, so they can bear fruits many times, so it increases chances of survival. So these are the main points lah that you can say. So I think I will end the video right here. It's a bit long already, so hopefully you learn a few things for chapter 1. Hope this helped you with your revision. So I'll see you guys again real soon in